Hello, and welcome back to From Talent to Performance, where we explore the latest trends and insights in the world of talent. Today, we have a special guest with us, Dr. Mirjam Baars, who is an expert in the field of talent management and the future of work. Alongside Team A Method's CEO, Mr. Blom, we will be uncovering the future of talent and the trends that are shaping it. Three main themes: hybrid works, talent management, and upskilling and reskilling. The future of talent is a topic of critical importance as it directly impacts the success of organizations and the career prospects of individuals. The landscape of work is constantly evolving and adapting to new technological advancements and changes in the way people work. It is crucial for organizations and employees alike to understand the current trends and challenges in talent management and to prepare for what the future of work may look like. With the increasing shift towards remote and hybrid work, there is a need for new approaches to talent management and upskilling to ensure that organizations and employees are equipped to thrive in this new environment. This conversation will provide valuable insights and guidance on how to prepare for the future of talent and stay ahead of the game. So, buckle up and join us as we delve into the exciting world of the future of talent and discover how organizations can thrive in a constantly evolving landscape of work. This is an episode you won't want to miss. How do you feel about joining us today, Dr. Baars and Andre?
It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah. It's a nice pleasure to be here, and it's nice to talk about this subject. So I'm happy to join.
Yeah, likewise for me, Yazan. I'm always happy to learn from our guests and to express and voice our experience to a broader audience. So I'm thrilled to be here.
Amazing. So, Dr. Baars, we are excited to dive into the topic hybrid works, which has been on the rise in the recent years due to the advancements in technology and the need for flexibility in the workplace. Can you tell us about the current trend of hybrid working and the research from Stanford that we discussed earlier?
Yeah, I think it's a very important topic at the moment because hybrid working just started to become uplifted during the corona epidemic. And before the epidemic, it was quite difficult to have this hybrid working realized. I think that a lot of employees wanted to do this hybrid working, but it wasn't. They weren't able to because a lot of management didn't offer them the opportunity. And during the pandemic, it turned out that employees turned out to be much more effective and much more productive than they had even imagined before. And nowadays, you see that employers offer a lot of opportunities now for hybrid working. So I think like 70% of the companies now have introduced hybrid working, and most people work like 2 days a week at home.
We work together on the same projects, and we work together, although we don't meet as often yet. How do you also feel about, being, for example, in a different country and the rest of your team being in a different country? How does that impact the progression of your business? How does that impact
From my personal experience, I mean, I've been a cosmopolitan and a digital nomad for many years already. And I really enjoy the benefits of it in terms of, I have the flexibility, I can balance my daily agenda. But if I reflect on that and listen to the people that I'm working with, they also say like, wow, you're really disciplined. And apparently this is something that fits me when I do my things. I'm very disciplined. I sit down and I'm concentrated, and I can work in my field, working with partners all around the world. I also know that as long as we have bonded, and when we feel that we are socially connected with each other, it's okay to work from a distance. But occasionally I have to go back, because there's also something about this personal relationship you have in order to open up all your senses and to really be partners. And I think this is the biggest challenge that people are facing now, is it's nice to be at home. If at home or in a cafe gives you the space to do what you want to do, but people are also lacking a little bit the social cohesion. Where do I tap in? Where do I get my answers? And of course, everybody has a certain level of interpersonal skills, how to connect with people and how to communicate. But doing that in a digital, virtual environment, that is something different. So I'm not saying it's not good, but there are some challenges behind it too. Because do not underestimate that for a lot of people, going to work is also a little bit more of me time. I'm doing the things for myself. I don't have to be the father or the husband or the boyfriend, or it's also giving a little bit me time. So it is nice, but what I want to say is that if you talk to people, everybody has his own needs in this, and this is, I think, where the company should be aware of and note that for saying like you're not allowed to work only 2 days is not a go, or you have to work 5 days is also I don't think that is a go. So if there is a way of giving somebody this personal attention and framework in how we can or she can work, I think it's a great thing. And just think about Holland, working at home means you're not driving 3 hours commuting, and that is also good for our environment. So
that's very true. I think it also comes with a plethora of risks. I mean, the research from Stanford that I've mentioned earlier showed that 70% of companies now have a formal form of hybrid working, with most organizations allowing employees to work 2 days physically at the office and rather the other days at their own discretion, either at the home or office. Can you share your thoughts on this trend and the challenges faced by management and HR during the distribution of office spaces and preventing disproportionate use? I mean, you said obviously staying at home gives you a lot more flexibility. However, the risks that come with it as well for employers and from a C-level perspective, like as executives looking at it, how does it exactly tap into the distribution of office spaces and preventing disproportionate use?
Yeah, if you think about the office spaces, and of course, it's a challenge for management to figure out how can we effectively use these office spaces, because there are some days like the Monday or the Friday in which mostly people are out. And when you have this like big fluctuations of people coming in and out, then they can become very, how do you call it? Uncontent, and the people start to, get frustrated because they want to work and they want to work, like being able to concentrate. But if there are a lot of people in the office space, then it can be difficult for them to get this concentration they need to do that job. So I think that's a big challenge for management nowadays, to figure out how they can make sure that there are not too much people in the office, but also not too less. And what I also consider, especially when you talk about talent development, I think it's very important to realize that whenever you start working from home, then you also miss like the informal contacts, which usually lead to learning. So we usually address like going to the machine which makes coffee for you, and then having these small talks with colleagues. And I think it's like everybody knows that this small talk with coffee are usually the moments in which you get this new insights, you discover new ways of thinking just by small talk with colleagues. So I think a lot of managers I've spoken with also, they mentioned that they have the feeling that whenever people work quite a lot at home, then they kind of miss this learning curve, and this learning curve starts to become effective when people relate to each other, they see each other, and they have this informal contacts.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see.
And that is, I think, when you think about how work is executed, white collar work. I mean, people who are working with data behind the computers. As management, we always like it when people are autonomous. But being autonomous in your job means something. Doesn't mean that you are not interdependent of the others. And I think this peer-to-peer, like Mirjam said, like informal talks or having a question that can be answered instantly. Because if you have a question and you sit next to your colleague, you might say like, hey, can you look over my shoulder? Can you guide me? Or how would you solve this? But to open up a Teams meeting or to pick up the phone and to call somebody who is maybe 100 kilometers away living in another town, that does not really work. So I do believe that by working hybrid, we have to find ways that we can deal with this learning and collaborative mode of conduct. How do we go around with that? And I think that should be a very strong point of attention for managers who are dealing with hybrid working environments.
From what I'm sensing, there is some sort of mixed feelings from a managerial perspective about hybrid working. For instance, you would really endorse this flexibility, but at the same time, it would also encourage, like engagement among the employees and among, especially you both as managers, looking at it from a managerial perspective. What I'm saying is that you would like people to feel flexible and feel like they're at home, but you would also like this encouragement and this engagement from employees whenever they show up at work and they ask questions and they interact with their other colleagues and they have this social cohesion, as you mentioned. How do you think companies can put effort in compensating for the loss of contact? Let's say for people who are doing this hybrid work between colleagues, could it be through informal knowledge sharing sessions? Dr. Baars, you've mentioned lunch and learns and pizza sessions. That was quite interesting too.
Yeah, I think that's what companies nowadays put a lot of effort in, because they realize that the informal contacts, they kind of lose them, and they put a lot of effort in knowledge sharing. I call it knowledge sharing sessions, like pizza sessies or lunch and learns. And well, it helps. And I think especially when people start working a lot from home, they kind of have also developed this feeling that they want to be connected again. So whenever these kind of learnings arrive, they are showing that they are able to join them, then they will probably join them because they also feel that they need this connection with the colleagues. So
understandable.
Yeah.
You can definitely see that there is some movement in that direction. I've also heard that some companies are saying like, hey, let's create this buddy system where people are checking in now on regular times with each other, where they're having peer-to-peer meetings. They're organizing a lot of things in order to have this, I would say, like this feeling of belonging.
Yeah.
And to enhance this feeling of your worth.
Yeah.
And I think they're doing that from a social, emotional context, instead of just, what are your deliverables and did you manage your timesheets? But that there is a movement as far as I'm concerned, in a better direction.
Yeah. I think checking in on your coworkers in general is something that needs to be a company standard. It's not about, just pure formality. I think there also always has to be these boundaries, however, between formal and informal situations. However, checking on your coworkers and employees in the company always sets the scene for higher engagement. As far as I see it, the more you allow this freedom of expression about how you're feeling, for example, being a hybrid worker or being on-site or being even fully home office, I think that also makes a huge difference in the level of production, like among coworkers and employees. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I think that's right. What I also see at the moment is that that's also what research has shown, that whenever workers work a lot from home, like you mentioned, like totally from home, especially when they are younger, they kind of miss the opportunity to, show themselves to their managers, and that can can have a disadvantage effect on their growth opportunities. So I think that's what the research shown, that the growth opportunities kind of diminish in the way that people are not that visible anymore. So they can work maybe pretty hard from home, but the manager doesn't see it, and then they are not addressed to as having the opportunity to get a higher function. And that can be quite frustrating for people who work quite, like they work hard, but they are not getting the appreciation,
recognition,
the hard work, because they don't show it, the manager doesn't see it.
Would you be with or against tracking systems that allows, for example, there are a lot of software tools nowadays that are coming into the spotlight, and I think there are so many systems and softwares that allow managers and employees to stay in check. For instance, from what I've seen among, like people who work, for instance, in the marketing or they work in other departments, they always have this system where you log in and you tap in a couple of hours. You say, I've worked this much, and it tracks everything, although it has that huge data privacy concern. However, would you be, for instance, on that side, or would you?
No, I would be quite against that, because I think when you work with people who are more highly educated, you don't need this, like big brother systems to watch you. I think you must rely on the internal motivation of the employees to do their job properly. So, but it's difficult. I think for a manager, it's also difficult if you don't see your employees on a regular basis, and then to figure out how they are really achieving, what kind of results are they achieving. So it makes much more difficult. And maybe it's a question of time that we have to develop new ways to address these issues. But I think for HR department, this can be quite a challenging situation, I think.
What would you both recommend as a solution, as a middle ground solution, between not over tracking and not over, like spectating your coworkers, however, at the same time, still find the balance, because employees want to feel, recognized, and they want to feel like that they're heard and seen, but at the same time, employers want to make sure that their employees are doing most of their job. And I think that's a very controversial topic at the moment. People are still trying to figure that out. But what would be your insight before we move on to the next thing?
I believe that technology can really be supportive, and when it's driven for the need to control, then I think it's the wrong choice. I mean, of course, you have systems when it comes to, how do people collaborate? How do people provide each other feedback? How do they communicate with each other? We cannot ignore the technology of social media.
True.
But it takes a proper mindset, an individual to know, what can I do in order to feel connected? How can I use my interpersonal skills and to make sure that I'm part of this community, that I can contribute, that I'm feeling that I'm really helping my colleagues, because I truly believe in this interdependency. And for that, I think we need to help people to create that mindset, because a lot of people are used to the fact, as soon as I do something with data, I communicate, or I log in because I know that they are checking if I'm logged in. And I think that's if that mindset exists, then it doesn't work. Then I should say, forget about that technology, because it will just give you not the results that you're hoping for. So really giving it consideration, what kind of technology can we use to make sure that we are fully connected with each other? And what can we do with the data? Is the data there to help me to figure out when to check in? And that is coming back to the fact, if somebody is coming into the office and you can see that this person has been crying or is in a rush, or, then it's so easy to say, can I help out? Or how are you doing? But how do you do that if you don't meet people?
True.
So this kind of informal talk, this informal support that we can provide each other when we meet face to face. Can we replace that completely? I don't think so. Not with artificial intelligence, but technology might help us, but it has to come from the right purpose. Why are we using this system? And then I think that technology could make a difference in this field of this transition of hybrid working compared to the old. You have to be present in order to prove that you are valuable.
I resonate with that. I really agree with that. I also find that there's a huge difference between the size of the corporation. Like, I feel like bigger corporations, regardless whether you're working hybrid or you're working on site, there will always be this level of lack of informality. People, like the amount of complaints I've heard, for instance, about how much people struggle working in a big corporation, consulting companies, or for instance, they don't feel heard. They don't feel like the organizational hierarchy over there doesn't allow them to express or share their opinions sometimes. So I think it's a lot to do with the mindset and the size of the organization, more than just, the idea behind it. Like, people need to be convinced that, okay, this is a way to go, instead of, just hopping on trends, for instance, or listening to what the market really wants, right? I think there's a lot more to it than just, looking at one technology and considering whether you would like to implement it and invest in it or not. It has a lot to do with more than just superficial informal talks, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to get on a psychological deeper level where you, make it like a therapist conversation. Like, at the end of the day, what you're trying to understand is how you're feeling. And it's a genuine human connection that you're trying to achieve, right?
That exactly. It's just about, tapping in as a human, as a fellow co-worker, just using your normal human values. Yeah.
Exactly. So as we move on to the next theme, we'd like to delve into the research that supports the effectiveness of online learning. And as you can gather from what the episode has been going on about so far, talent management and hybrid working, the second theme is specifically about talent management. I would really like to hear your insight, both of you, about how can we delve into the research that supports the effectiveness of online learning, the types of online learning that are most popular. We will also discuss the impact it has had on employees and employers, the importance of upskilling and reskilling in the current job market. Dr. Baars, can you share with us your thoughts on the trend of online learning? How is it impacting talent management?
Yeah, I think that after the pandemic, the online learning activities have raised quite high. So, for instance, employees usually, if they put like 4 times more effort into online learning than before. But you also see like governments also put like 9 times more effort in online learning than before. So it's quite a rise that has been effectuated. And what's interesting is that we kind of developed ourselves in this new field of online learning. At first, it was difficult because people didn't really like online learning. They didn't really feel attracted to it because they felt like it's a lonely way of learning. But during the pandemic, they kind of discovered that it can make a difference and it can have an added value. So they discovered that you kind of, in an online learning situation, you can also have the feeling as if you're in a real classroom. And that makes a really positive difference, I think.
I think the physical aspect will always be lacking when there is online learning. I feel like this accountability, let's say, for example, my experience as a student, whenever there's a class online, I feel way less motivated to just sit in front of a desktop or a laptop screen and just, listen to someone teach something. Although there have become, like people have started, like to point out, okay, how can we make this more fun? And the more the screens that the lecturers or the people have in trainings or teaching stuff, the more interesting people are going to be like, oh, wow, this is interesting. That's so many screens, and the content that they share as well, like attention catches and whatnot. But I think when you have people around you sitting next to you, there's this sudden accountability, regardless whether you're sitting through a class or you're sitting through a training or you're even working on something or studying. I think you just feel accountable that you need to focus as well. You lose procrastination, you lose, this attention distractions. You just, you're feeling like you need to work as well, just because everyone is working too.
I think
Right.
also that when you have this classroom situation, then I think sometimes we think that when you're being educated or learning that it has to do with the content. But I think that we realized during the pandemic that it's not about the content, it's about socializing each other and talking about things that are important to you. And I think that's the part you can't grasp with online learning. So this classical situation in which you really feel connected to the other persons is really very, very important.
Andre, have you experienced situations with online learning?
Didn't do any research, so I'm just talking from the stories I've heard, the experiences I have with my clients. For example, one client said, like, we really have to do something, and they bought this license on LinkedIn, where they have a tremendous amount of training opportunities online.
Okay.
Well, really nicely framed. If you go through, it really helps you. But what they are encountering is that although it is available, people are not picking it up. And this company did a research about it. Why is it? And then, of course, it is like the time, the pressure on the job is so hard, and I cannot really experiment it. I cannot follow up. So just by offering the online learning, I think in general, we would say like that is actually not enough. Some people will pick it up out of their ambition, out of their discipline, maybe because they have the time, but the mainstream is not picking it up. They're trying it maybe once, they have to retry. Then there's another element in the pandemic, and as I just moved to Portugal 3 years ago, and I met a lot of international people who also moved, Duolingo is working. The technology of Duolingo is apparently that you feel that you are doing something, and it almost feels like it is adaptive, that Duolingo is responding to your needs. It is not like that. And when people are picking it up, they bring it into practice, because then they go to the cafe and the first thing they ask, like, "Pois galão, por favor?" And then they get a response. So it's really, they can immediately execute or bring into practice what they've learned. So yeah, online learning is good when there is a certain need and when there is enough stimuli around it. And I think that is also a case in the business. We say like everybody needs to develop, or we are enabling you to develop, or we're facilitating it. But what is really driving the people to do that? What kind of stimuli do they get? Do they get the attention? Do they get the space to experiment? And I also think what Mirjam says, and that is my own reflection, if you ask me personally, what was the best learning environment for you, where you really took up the knowledge or the skills, it was when I was doing it together with others. On the university, of course, the professor could stimulate me and open my eyes to look at different things, but it was a discussion with my fellow students that really, where I could kind of create an agency and create my own thoughts about it. When I'm diving, it's nice that an instructor is saying something, but when I have to do it, to execute it together with my buddy going on the water, preparing it, there's where I really learned it. So I think this interdependency with your own peers, having the opportunity to execute it and to bring it into practice, I think that is an essential part of using the technology of online learning. And luckily there are learning management systems really that have that hybrid environment where there's actually also social media focused on learning, where people are interacting, can ask questions, debate, and I think that is a nice development. But again, it is all about doing it together.
But what do you think people might not be accepting it? As you said, like in your first example, you said people started implementing it, but why do you think people are not accepting it, and what could make them start accepting it? I mean, people obviously still have their opinions on different methods of learning, and everyone has their own, as we believe in TMA, everyone has their own learning style that is specifically exclusive for that person. So what do you think people look at?
That is one part. Everybody has his own preference in learning. Do you want to bring it straight into practice? How do you balance theory with practical information? How much do you want to explore yourself? But also in the context of in the phase of your life. And I think what this company learned in my first example, from an employee survey, it was said like, we don't have enough development opportunities. We are not offered diversity in the learning programs that we have. So the company bought this system and said like, now you have it.
Yeah. But it doesn't have the content that makes people get excited and be like, oh, I want to sign up right away.
Yeah. And then everybody's saying, okay, that was a question I asked in the survey. Now I have it, but when can I do it? And what is in it for me if I follow this one up? And then managers everybody is on a tight schedule, and, then we have 1 or 2 talks, maybe 3 talks a year, maybe an informal. How about the e-learning program of LinkedIn? Yeah, that's very interesting. Good. What are you doing? I still have to pick my one. Okay, good. And then they run off. And at the end of the line, 6 months later, nobody's done anything. And so creating this arena where learning and performance comes together, I think that is something that is not just done because you offer the instruments. It is really like creating a dialogue with each other, creating this atmosphere, this arena where things can take place.
Yeah, I think that's very important nowadays, especially when we talked about this hybrid working and also hybrid learning, is that it's important that managers create like buddy systems with their co-workers, and they put a lot of effort in developing their skills, developing their talents, and having this one-to-one conversation in order to do so. I think that's more important nowadays than it ever was, I think.
Yeah. I remember when I was learning Mirjam, and I had an assignment from school, and because I did it with my friend, it gave me an extra boost to do it. I would not postpone my learning because then I would hinder him in his learning. So this it's also creating kind of an extra responsibility.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But would you both agree that it's the responsibility of the instructors to kind of communicate? Because from what I understand so far is that there is a huge gap in communicating the online learning tools or communicating the online learning content for the receivers on the other end, so the end users of the content itself. Do you think it's a responsibility for the instructors or the people who are providing these tools to kind of clarify what the goals are and what can you achieve from these tools, for instance, especially when it comes in the context of talent management?
Well, I think what especially we talked about hybrid working and about hybrid learning, and I think the instructors of this online teaching, they have to be aware that they have to develop a hybrid form as well, like being like for a small time online and then giving their students or the employees the opportunity to do something by e-learning and then come together as a group and do a whole day of trading, and then also a small online learning session. Look, like to have different ways of learning instead of only one way. I think 100% online learning is devastating for your motivation. But if you combine it with online meetings, combine it with classical meetings, combine it with other things which are different from 100% online learning, I think then it can be great.
Yeah.
Can you share?
And I would add to Mirjam, also include the other stakeholders. What I see in the business is if I go to a normal protocol, there is a dialogue between a manager and an employee. They decide on a certain kind of development. Then they go to HR. HR has a library of all kinds of possibilities. They choose something. And then what happens then? The individual is sent out. Maybe he has fellow students, but the stakeholders in his job who can benefit from this learning are not engaged.
Okay.
So many times you hear that the candidate is coming back even from a course. How was the course? Yeah, the lunch was great and I had a great time and I've learned something. Are there managers then sitting down with the employee and saying, what did you learn? How can we make sure that you really internalize and have a continuous development on your skills? I remember how you talked in the beginning about the significance of, being consistent, and it's an ongoing process. It's an infinite game, right? Learning and development. And involving the other stakeholders, I think, is also a very important part.
There are many types of online learning that are most popular right now, such as management training, Lean Six Sigma, and remote leadership. What are your thoughts on these formats, let's say, and how have they impacted employees and employers as it allows more task-oriented learning time, targeted instruction, and quicker access to the subject matter? But when it comes to talent management, do you think they could, help with upskilling and reskilling, or would they be a waste of time, especially that there is no follow-up on the type of content that is being offered?
Yeah, I think what we saw in the research is that the trainings you mentioned, like the management trainings or the Lean Six Sigma, these kind of trainings were a lot of asked by managers during pandemic time. And what we see now is that these issues still are very much addressed. But we also see that what we talked before is that the way of learning is more like a hybrid form of learning, like more online and offline at the same time, or yeah. I think what's important. What?
I'm sorry, go on.
Okay. And what we also see as a development, which is important nowadays, is that companies are kind of having their total working pool diminished. Like, I think in a couple of years, every company kind of has this structural refit in terms of the less employees, like a quarter of the total working pool. And at the same time, you see this development that the working pool has to develop themselves in ICT skills. So they have to become more digitalized. And I think that's a big challenge for managers and HR to have this realized, which is quite something we together have to work on, especially because the labor market is also difficult nowadays.
So moving on to our next theme, can you give us like a brief overview about the revised upskilling and reskilling?
Yeah, what we see is that what organizations nowadays need is that employees are being skilled in very, like a fast pace in terms of their ICT skills. So a lot of employees need to figure out new ICT systems. They have to sometimes have to work together with ICT persons to have their job changed. And that's a big challenge nowadays for companies, I think, because especially when we work with older employees, they sometimes have difficulty in this new ICT systems. And by online learning, you cannot always help them with this. So,
when I look at, I have a kind of an idea, and I don't have a glass ball where I can predict the future. But this is a little bit the idea that I have around the future workforce. That's coming to the fact that, robotics, automation, and particularly artificial intelligence. I mean, if you see now the growth and the dynamics around this, i.e., on the net, I was even shocked. I typed in TMA method, my own company, and this IE produced a better description of my company than I could do myself. And within a minute, it is crazy, right? And then I said, I do not really want this kind of language. Do you have an alternative? You push the button and you get an alternative, really like a storyline. And I mean, it's amazing. So I'm thinking like, okay, what does this mean for the people on communication, on marketing? I'm working with the Ministry of Defense, and they're also struggling, with all the technology. Do we need the still pilots on an F-16, or can we do it with drones? So if you think about, what is the future of work, and the reports of the World Economic Forum, they predict that a lot of jobs that we know now are completely vanished or obsolete within the time frame of 20 to 30 years. So if I look at the future, then I think like, the workforce is going to be a lot of technology. But I think we also need, and maybe it's the same word again, a hybrid worker. A worker who can work with IT, data, in all kinds of forms, in creating algorithms, programming, but also just on an application form and on applying form. So we need a hybrid people, but I also believe we still need people's work. And I'm sure that at some point science will be able to make a scan of your brains and your heart, and then you get a psychological profile with a therapy around it. But I believe that we still need service people and handcraft people like carpenters, and I know that's also maybe a little bit buzzy, but the creative people. So how do we manage or actually stimulate people to have a perspective on their own social economic position in the future, also for their children? What do we need to do? The evolution of things are going so rapidly. So how do we make sure that we stay in sync or calibrate, at least at certain times, with what's going on in the world, and what can I do as an individual to make sure that I have position? Because if I do that, then I'm the role model for my children. So this is what I think. Long life learning is so important to deal with all the things that are going on. And that brings it back to talent management. Do people really understand where their uniqueness is lying based on the talents, and how they can utilize that, or at least use their own talents for their own future in creating the right skills, in developing the right skills. And then you have what I call micro and macro learning. Micro is for me like instant. I need to weld a piece of iron, then I need a welding machine, I need the iron, and I need the guidance that I can actually practice it. But when it comes to this, straightforward. But when it comes to the service, this is what I call macro, where you learn to become a nurse, where there are many elements in, how do we relate to people? How can we be having the coaching ability to guide a patient in his track to become healthy again? So, and that is what I call macro. And that is a dynamic that you can continuously develop that, because every time there's new technology that maybe help you to be a better service provider in the job you're doing. Psychologists, nurses, doctors, but all kinds of other services too, right? So,
True.
For me, long life learning is, I think, essential. And let's step in on the talents of people so that they learn something that is really fitting them. That will create, I think, a general welfare. And now I'm preaching too much, I think.
No, it's interesting that you mentioned AI and, like the use case behind AI. I mean, there's been a lot of talks about it. I mean, most discussed topic nowadays, especially when it comes to upskilling and reskilling. I read a quote actually the other day that was a little bit funny because so many people are scared that they're going to be replaced by AI, for example, or they're going to be replaced by technology, like you said, in a few years. So many jobs are going to be diminished. People won't be needed that much because if you can train a technology or you can train a robot to do a job that someone does it for a certain amount of money, and you're saving yourself so much cost and so much effort, right? And especially when we discussed at the very beginning, when you talked about how the social cohesion is important and how people need to tap in onto each other, even though we're being distant from each other and that's lacking, people might find an even stronger motivation to implement, technology into the corporation, which is obviously there are different perspectives on that. There's, like the pessimistic view where people are like, oh, that's the end of, like human evolution. And, like people are heading towards more robotics and machine learning. But at the same time, the way I see it is that AI will not necessarily replace you. A person who uses or knows how to use AI is going to replace you. People who adapt, people who learn this technology, learn how it works and adds it to its side, becomes its own personal assistant, it becomes its own helper. I think that boosts productivity, and it would definitely, boost so many industries, especially, like industries such as marketing and trainings and, because it also excludes so much of the human error. It really diminishes human error. And I feel like
you definitely have a point there, Yazan. But my question is also, and maybe the whole theme of today was hybrid working, hybrid learning, and now we're talking about a hybrid workforce. When you look at AI, I'm from old school. When I'm digesting information, I want to know the source because I want to know if it's valid. I don't tap everything from the Google search engine because you never know if it's valid, right? So you need to go to the source. What is the source of the IA? And I think we need a hybrid person. That is what I meant. The person who understands that and give you the insights. Like, this is solid information. It's well researched. It's not just curated from the net because it was popular language. So we should not rely too much on, as humans, we should still have the power to question the data.
critical thinking skills.
Critical thinking skills. We need this tacit knowledge in order to understand the data, but also to use it. And I think that Mirjam will definitely have her perspective on that too, coming from a scientific point of view, right?
No, I agree with you that it's important that you have to, especially considering AI, it's important to be critical thinking about how it works and what are the backdrops of it, because it can also create a lot of damage that we've seen.
Yeah, and of course it can also enlighten you a little bit in giving information that you would not consider, but now it becomes interesting to check out. But to make it valid, we need our human skills. I think that is really important.
I think what we tend to forget is that we think that we have to develop ourselves in ICT skills, but when you look at the research, they kind of mention that social skills become more and more important nowadays, and that because a lot of ICT skills, they kind of take over your job. But what's still there and that can be automated is the social skills, the contact with people, the empathy kind of stuff. That's nothing a computer can do. And we will see in a couple of years, I think, that those social skills become more and more important because is the added value of the workforce nowadays.
Yeah. I read an interesting article. Probably you know the acronym, the VUCA world.
Mm-hmm.
And there's now also another one, and I think there's some are popping up. And this is called the Benny world, where everything is brittle, where there's not insecurity, but it is more like an anxiety. Nothing is linear anymore. All is non-linear and many interpretations. Anyway, but to counterattack or to counterfight this environment it was basically only human skills to face the anxiety of people. We need empathy. We need to dare on our intuition. We need to socialize with each other and unite each other. And I found that a really interesting article, because if you look at talent management, it also says like, how do you tick and what are your needs, and use your talents in order to connect with people. We are social organisms. We need each other. We are interdependent of each other. And I think that is the way that we can really bring talent management to his best, using the human skills, bringing humanity back into the business.
That is true. I mean, at the end of the day, no matter how much AI develops, although there are fears about, AI becoming autonomous and AI becoming, acting on its own and replacing human skills, especially also with that part, empathy, because, like artificial emotional intelligence is also a controversial topic, is that the CEO of OpenAI went on an interview the other day and he brought it up. He said, worst case scenario is that lights off for all of us. And people made so much out of that because they were a bit afraid. People still are accepting the whole idea behind AI, right? But looking at the data, the areas of ICT skills that will be in high demand in the coming years, such as data science, big data, cloud computing, robotization, and artificial intelligence. What are your thoughts on the impact that technological advancements, can people read this information and these facts and change the course of their studies, change the course of their career focus? They say, okay, these ICT skills are required. And they use already existing tools such as AI, for instance. They use it in their favor to develop themselves in that regard. Do you think people would be avoiding these trends, or they would be more inclined to hop on them and use the current existing technological advancements in their favor to kind of develop themselves further? So again, back to upskilling and reskilling in that sense.
I think it probably depends on their talents. If you're good in ICT skills, then you probably develop those skills very, like fluently. But I think that people who have more talent skills in terms of empathy and social skills, they probably will develop themselves earlier on in these topics, I think. And
that is true, but isn't it true, Mirjam, that it also needs an environment?
Yeah.
And if we focus too much on guiding our people into the IT direction, I think as companies we should really think about, how do we balance this? And if I look at the younger generations, and I don't want to stigmatize, but just I think in general we could say that the younger generations who are digital natives, they had the environment to develop their skills. Even if I look at my 7-year-old daughter, she's smarter on the iPad than I am. And I'm not even, I think I'm pretty okay on the IT level. So the environment is also important. So my question would be to companies, how do you balance? What is your business? How much are you willing to depend on the IT? And are people serving the IT, or is the IT serving the people? And of course, automation can help us to have more time to use our human skills. So my question would be, again, what kind of environment are we creating for people to develop their, let's call it human skills instead of the IT skills? Because if we don't create the environment, it will not happen.
For the listeners of this podcast, how important it is for employees developing the skills that are needed to remain competitive in the job market. Just like everyone that is not in the IT department, they're also scared that at some point they won't be needed anymore. So how do they remain competitive in that sense?
Yeah, I think you realize I recently heard that there was this banking company who trained their employees, like HR employees, in doing a bad news conversation by a robot. And it turned out that this robot was very good at doing this kind of bad news conversation because it doesn't have any empathy. But it showed, I think, maybe in the future it can happen that the robot also takes over this kind of, social skills, maybe from HR people. I have no idea what the future will be like with regard to that, but I think it's difficult to really understand the future on this topic, I think.
But would you have a recommendation on how would you remain in the competitive job market? I mean, people are looking more and more for people who, are more informed about these things.
Yeah.
Right? Like when people do job postings, they don't go looking for someone who is, I mean, of course, it depends on their talents and the job requirement for sure.
Well,
what would you recommend?
What I really like from I did like 20 years of research in people, in organization with regard to talent development. And one of the organizations which I really liked was this ICT company, Topdesk, and they didn't, select people, new employees on their skills or on their diplomas, but they selected on their learning eagerness. And I think that will be like something very much for the future for companies to do so, not really focus on diplomas because it doesn't really, usually it's not that important, the diplomas, but it's more important if people are willing and they have the drive to keep learning. And that's much more of a skill which is important nowadays than it was like 30 years ago, I think.
I think it's coming back, Yazan, as far as I'm concerned, how to stay competitive. I do understand that sometimes the dynamics in your personal life will not always allow you to be completely focused on yourself and your personal development. But I think people have to understand that if I take a break on my personal development, it means that I am falling behind. And then it takes a bigger effort to calibrate in what the market really needs. And you can actually, if I can make that comparison, and with due respect, but if you look at our learning system in general, the phrase that Mirjam, diplomas are not so important anymore, not the paper. What does the paper say that I finished a master 30 years ago? Am I still actual in all my data and all my knowledge, all my skills, and can I apply it? I have no idea. But the diploma is there. I'm not saying that it is not valuable because it says something about, in what field that you gain some knowledge. But if you look at the schooling system now, students are going to do their gymnasium and then, just as an example, and go to the university because they want to become a vet. But the moment they come to the market, the industry of medication and becoming a doctor for animals, the technology has taken place, there's new information, actually already a little bit outdated. So where is your practice? So I think the combination of making sure that you develop your knowledge, your cognitive level, but also making sure that you develop the competencies that are in the field are there, then you have a more sustainable future perspective, I think. And again, but to be competitive, it means and I fully agree with Mirjam, it's about your learning willingness and your learning ability that gives you that edge.
I think there needs to be credit where it's due, and I think it's important to highlight the efforts of employers that are making to provide upskilling and reskilling activities to their employees. Like, people aren't giving up on people just easily. And I don't think it's a pessimistic overview or outlook right now in the market. People are with 70% of employers indicating that they will be providing these activities between 2020 and 2025. It's actually rather impressive. People don't want to give up on their talents already, right? Like, even with the technological advancements, people still care about their people. They still care. They still believe that talent and human efforts would pay off, regardless whether there's a technological tap-in or not. So I think that's important to highlight. And I would like to ask you about your strategies. The organizations do you think could be using to ensure their employees have the necessary skills for the future in the role of upskilling and reskilling and adapting technological advancements? So from your perspective, how could they still maintain and retain the talent, yet allow them to adapt to where we're heading towards?
I think there has to be like this constant demand for learning. And in order to realize this, you have to change your HR system in terms of conversations with your employees. And what we usually did, like 1 or 2 times a year, we have this HR kind of conversation, like, how are you doing your job, and do you need extra reward for it? But I think you have to do these conversations more on a regular basis, like every week or every 2 weeks, just to really a deeper conversation about what's your talent, how are you developing your talent, what kind of challenging task can you add to your function. And I think I see a lot of companies in my research who are starting developing this kind of developmental culture, I think, in the workplace by having this conversations on a regular basis, and quite often instead of on a regular basis, like once a year.
Yeah. I was triggered by the book of Mirjam, where she said, like, organizations cannot longer provide a job security. But what they can do is they can provide a development security. And
Wow.
yes, I think this continuous dialogue is, I think, very important, not only between the manager and the individual, but as a team, as a community. Create that arena where performance and development goes hand in hand. And it is still striking me quite a lot that in our day-to-day activities, we have organized everything, but one thing is what we don't do, is that we train as a team. We always appraise people on their individual performance or on their individual learning accomplishments. But if you really want to have a good value in the organization, we should do it as a team. And in sports, you see it all the time. Highly professional athletes are training and training and training to execute on critical moments to their utmost. And sometimes they even fail on that. They learn from it, and they fall, they stand up, and they do it again. And in business, we never train with each other. If we have a team event, then it's probably a barbecue. Are we going through the scenarios where people are getting new perspectives and new challenge? I think that is, a very important thing. And I was really triggered, Mirjam. Thank you for that, because I'm using that phrase quite a lot now when I'm going into the business. What do you offer when it comes to what is your value proposition for your employees? And then they say a good salary and learning development. And then, okay. So you give a learning guarantee. So I'm starting to use that. And that is, for a lot of people, it's really an eye-opener, I think. And I'm very grateful for that quote from you.
That's all great. I definitely agree with you, Andre and Dr. Baars, about everything that you just said about the, like, how can employers tap into the developing market. And I would really like to encourage the listeners to take an active role in developing their skills, and ask them to constantly ask themselves, where can I offer added value, and how can I continue to offer this in an environment in which, ICT plays an increasingly important role. I would also like to encourage them to take advantage of the opportunities provided by their employers, right, for upskilling and reskilling, and the resources available on the internet to enhance their skills. Because I think as soon as you start giving up on developing yourself, and as soon as you start giving up on, I don't want to say fitting in, I hate the word fitting in, but as soon as you stop looking at the environment around you, you're just stuck in your own bubble, then the less relevant you become, right? And people would require less from you over time. So with that being said, I would like to thank you both actually for your time today. It was really, really insightful, very helpful as well. I'm sure for our listeners, I personally have benefited a lot from talking to you, and I'm sure everyone listening to this podcast would feel the same way. Would you like to offer any last advice from your own perspective to the listeners, especially based on everything that we've talked about, the 3 themes, and also from your own personal insight for
I think
a final
what we
takeaway
discovered was this like hybrid working, hybrid learning kind of stuff. And it's important to nowadays to make sure that you have like a lot of regular conversations with your employees about their talents and how they might be developed, especially regarding the ICT challenges which are ahead of us.
Yeah, and my biggest advice would be like, take it up. It's not only the obligation or the responsibility of a manager, but we should do that as a community. We should not wait only for HR, but provide them the information. Really start to work in collaboration with your environment, and accept that we are interdependent of each other. We cannot do anything without somebody else, and I think that is what we can do. If we put our shoulders under the world, we can make it a great world.
Wonderfully said. Thank you both for your time today. Very much appreciated. And I encourage you to also join us on future episodes. Hopefully we'll have more insightful discussions on from talent to performance. And I would like to thank you once again for your time and your very insightful expert help. And looking forward to hearing back from you soon.
Thank you, Yazan. Thank you, Mirjam. Your work is really inspirational for me. Thank you.
It's nice for you. Thank you very much. And also interesting by your different ways of talking about the subject. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Perfect.
Okay, bye-bye.
If you've enjoyed this episode and want to learn more about the future of talent, be sure to subscribe to our podcast and never miss a beat. Also, feel free to share this episode with your friends and colleagues who may be interested in this topic. Your support helps us continue to bring you valuable insights and knowledge from industry experts like Dr. Baars. Until next time, stay informed and keep moving forward in the ever-evolving world of talent management.